Good afternoon, Scott Baker.
It is a good afternoon, Mikey, and good to see you. Good to see everyone joining us for another edition of Lead Better. This is our podcast, live now, on podcast later, to talk about today's field note. And the field note is entitled, I'm getting over here to the number, it's 1596, Let Weighty Decisions Marinate While You Focus on Other Matters. And I think there's a bit of we all kind of do that a little bit, the idea of like, I got to think about this for a while. But this idea of just putting it into the background, does your mind actually do this? Will it keep working in the background while you focus on other things? What do you think?
I think so. I think that it normally does that way for me. Like even when I was a kid studying in high school, I would try to take advantage of the fact that certain things would marinate for a while. I wouldn't try to study for 3 hours when it was a memorization exercise. It was something that I break up in a way that allowed my brain to be able to work for me with gaps. Like the things that I would think of as gaps would be like my subconscious would continue to process things. I think that's important.
Well, yeah, and there's a degree in the gap thing, and we know this just around an old model on learning, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which is if you space time in spaced repetition, that does help you actually apprehend material. And that format is pretty simple, and you can use it for many things, which is if you learn something, review it 24 hours later, then review it a week later, then review it a month later.
Right.
And your ability to retain it will be like way higher than people that just heard that lecture or read that book or saw that movie.
And it's also the advice that Don Draper gave to Betty or to Peggy when she was trying to come up with an ad campaign for Colgate or something. And his advice was, you think about it deeply for a while, and then you put everything aside and you forget it completely.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of comes to you, right? And so for creative types like Don Draper, in trying to explain his process, right? And of course, writers put those words into Don Draper's mouth.
Yes, because just to be clear, Don Draper is not real.
Oh, he's real for me.
I guess, right. Yeah. But there are Don Drapers of the world. Yes. He's an archetype of that. Yes.
And so I'm sure that when they were writing and researching for that part, they just didn't come up with that on their own. I'm sure in talking with ad execs who couldn't really identify what their process to coming to a great creative revelation was like. And so you might think, okay, well, that's good for creative. But when it comes to actually making a decision like whether or not we should participate in this acquisition of a competitor, that's a weighty decision, but it's not like I need some kind of creative force to tell me whether or not I should or should not do it. Right?
Yeah. Right.
The ad campaign for Colgate's not going to pop into my mind all of a sudden. So why does it apply here?
Yeah. Well, I think the idea of letting an idea, marinate, it's at least safer than, what's your secret? Crystal meth, or I drink heavily. None of those are going to work out for very long. You might get an idea, but I don't know if it's going to work. So in the field note itself, part of this admonition is that if you have, it's not just taking a break, right? It's kind of giving instructions to the brain, then taking the break, like before sleep or an interval period. And the field note actually advocates the idea of writing it down. Like you actually have to get it into a statement of the problem in writing. It can't just be like, I'm fussing around with this thing. And that's the difference. And then go to sleep, whatever, your brain will keep working on it. And then at the right moment, you can come back to it. I think that we all want to skip that step of writing it down, though.
Right. Well, even before that, the notion of like, let's actually take time to decide what is the problem. Like, what are we solving for? Is there like taking time to actually roll around with, is this the right problem? Because you can easily solve for the wrong problem. And then,
for sure. Yeah.
You climb the ladder and realize you're on the wrong roof. Right.
Yep. Right. Yeah. And we talk about that a lot in Admired Leadership, that one of a leader's jobs is actually helping people clarify what they're actually working on.
Right.
That a lot of times the problem that's presented to the leader or the problem the person is working on isn't the right issue. And that's where you get that judgment from the person. So I do think that that this idea of, well, go ahead, actually write it down. You're like, I already know it. It's going to be silly. It's like, it's not like is there some sort of mystical thing that happens when I write this down? Now, like what I did.
There is something mystical that happens, right? Because you're choosing words. So even as you choose what words to use to articulate the problem, you're saying no to a whole bunch of words. And when you're allowing words to actually surface and land on the page, you're doing something mystical with them. Like your choices are now represented in that statement. So the choices you made on as to like what exact vocabulary you used, right? We were talking about vocabulary here earlier. And so the difference between marinate and marinade, right? Is a decision that we made in the title of this particular field note, because there is a case to be made that marinade is the right word here.
Yeah,
right?
Not as common, but some chefs use it that way as a verb instead of a noun.
Right. So, but the commonality of marinade is the thing that would get us in trouble.
Right.
So,
that's because it's the noun, not the verb. Yeah.
So if you were to articulate what it is that was the most important thing that allows you to say, when we're in these situations, do we use marinate or marinade? It's like clarity is what the most important thing here is. Not accuracy, clarity, right? Yeah. So for me to choose the words clarity and put that on a piece of paper, and not accuracy and put that on a paper, like there's 100 different options of the not word that it could have been, right?
Yeah, right.
But I chose accuracy to position it next to clarity so that we're making a very specific point as to the type of problem we're trying to solve here. If it's a different word, the whole statement ends up being different. Right?
Yes, correct. And each word choice matters. Now, what if I told you that if the ink is seeping into the paper and there's a mystical reaction that happens, what if I wrote down last night, do I really need to write down problem statements for my brain to work on them? And then when I woke up this morning and I picked up my magic 8-ball, it said, no, not really.
You just mixed a metaphor with seeping ink, and magic 8-balls, all in the same thing.
All right. I mean, I'm exaggerating a point, but I actually do think it's right. And I do think that we have this tendency, right? There's a resistance in us when a speaker says, I want you to write this down. Or you're reading a book and it says, maybe write down the 3 things of whatever, right? Or,
if you only remember one thing from this talk, this is what
write this one. Yeah. And then we don't. So the field note itself says, if you got a problem, write down the problem. This is the problem I'm having, as specifically as you can. And plenty of people in the self-help literature have been like, write down the goal that you're really focused on this month and write it on a card so that you can look at it frequently. And probably they're right. It's not just having a mantra you say out loud. So I think I want to test this because I don't think I've done this very much. I don't think I've done this sort of like, maybe I have a list of problems, but like maybe you should do this one card at a time. Like when I'm really thinking about it. And then actually you could write down the answer on the card or what you think is kind of coming out of this. Now, we can report back on that. I do want to highlight that I got an email, just a regular company, corporate, email today now many people are familiar with David Allen's book, Getting Things Done. And then there's whole GTD disciples out there. I read the book. I think there's some brilliant things in there. I probably lean more to I'm not really a GTD practitioner. Cal Newport, for example, well known in the space, was a GTD practitioner, but then sort of modified it for normal human beings, so it wouldn't be quite as obsessive. Now, I understand GTD people don't, you can write to Mikey at Admire Leadership. I'm not even sure that's the email. But I'm not dissing that. I think it actually probably does brilliantly work. But the point being, when you hear people talk about the idea of getting things done in David Allen, you start to think about like, oh, I've got to get to inbox zero and I've got to do all these things. I've got to have this outbrain for my mind and I've got to like get everything into the right categories and something to capture all the things. And even that can sound overwhelming, right?
Yep.
But there's a lot to be learned, even if you're just a numbskull like me. So I still get the emails from getting things done. And so today's was the headline in the email is probably what got me to read it, was your mind is lying to you and you don't even notice. And it's not about the same thing that our field note is about, but it is around this idea that we're kind of overwhelmed with all the things that we're thinking about, probably including many decisions. But one of the things that I liked, the sentence I liked was, most people are thinking about how they should be thinking about what they should be thinking about, and then trying not to think about that. And I was like, yeah, because it's like, yeah, you're all the time, you're like, am I thinking about the right things?
Yeah.
I probably should be thinking more about that. Let me think about that thing that I should be thinking about. And, oh gosh, I can't do that now. So let me not think about that right now, but I really should be thinking about that. And we're overwhelmed, and why I think the old-fashioned card mechanism of writing down the problem might work, because somebody was pointing out the other day, why is it that all young people on social media seem to be trying to do things that make them sort of older and more sophisticated, and the old people on social media are like, acting like they want to be teenagers again? Mm-hmm. And one of the theories of the person I saw posting this was saying, we have conflated all kinds of time continuums where we see all the different things all the time. Like all the different things you could be and do and think about is all swirling about us in a way that just wasn't even true, not 400 years ago, 40 years ago, or even 5 years ago. And so in that, this problem of being able to let a problem marinate is probably even worse for most people. So here's a simple solution.
Right. Ernest Hemingway did it.
Okay.
Ernest Hemingway was famous for deliberately stopping himself from finishing a scene. So he would write and he would let the scene be unfinished on the page, specifically to allow his subconscious mind to kind of work on the story while he was away from the actual written page. And so if he did it, right, it stands to reason that there'd be a good reason for us to be able to do it as well.
Yeah. Well, I do a thing that I've mentioned once or twice before, where I will open up a Word document or a Pages document in this very computer on the thing I need to do next. Sometimes I do that during the day, but sometimes I'll do that at the end of the day when I'm setting it up for the next morning, so that I've already put the title into the page document. I've already put the header of the thing that I'm going to start working on, so that I'm teeing that up. I'm already signaling to my brain, this is what you're going to work on first thing tomorrow morning. Now, that's not even a problem. That's just getting set to get things in motion faster, which also helps.
I think if Ernest Hemingway wasn't an author, that's probably the way he would set up his day if he's going to do the same kind of practice. And that anecdote, by the way, is from Scott Lavelle in our comments. So I appreciate putting that up there.
Yeah.
But it's a great little tool that people have used for generations. And even before, as you mentioned, social media or distracting internet was in place, people still felt the need to do this kind of thing. So it's not just because our attention spans are now shorter. It was a good practice anyway.
Well, one of the things the field note says is that many great thinkers and scientists and artists have had epiphanies like this, and the literature is full of them. There is some degree of scholarly research around these things. One of the things that seems to be indicated, as best I can understand, is that these things do tend to work better for the deeper, bigger problems. Right. As opposed to the everyday momentary things. We would often talk about in Admired Leadership about the difference between strategy and tactics. And so the idea of the problem that you're going to marinate on, the decision you're going to marinate on, is probably more strategic than tactical. Does that make sense?
Could be. I have a tendency to break it up as to whether or not it's a one-way problem or a two-way.
Okay, right. That's another good way.
Or a two-way decision. Right? If the decision is easily reversible, then you probably don't need to spend a whole lot of time marinating on it in the way that it's described. But if it's hard to reverse the decision, that's when you might spend the time. And it also kind of throws in the face the idea of decisiveness, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Decisiveness is this thing that is a leadership trait that is, venerated beyond almost anything. Like that's why leaders make the big bucks, because they're the decider. And then so we end up talking about decisiveness in this heroic way that makes people think that the faster they are to just kind of make a choice is what makes them a good leader. And so you work on making decisions quickly instead of intentionally saying, no, marination is the way to go.
Yeah, and actually, that's a decision of patience, right? So that's a way of actually thinking about it. Last thing, this isn't exactly the same point as the field note on the great examples from great figures in the past of letting something marinate, but I just have no other place to put this. But I remember reading years ago, and I'm pretty sure that I think it was a Thomas Edison example, and I think it's actually true, but you can go fact check me on it, was he would believe that when he would take a nap, that in his dream state, he would think of things, but he would later forget them. Except what he would do is he would hold something in his hand, like a bell. And that then when he actually fell asleep, the bell would drop. And it was in that slight transitory period where then he would come back to consciousness, and often the idea was there, right?
So he was making sure that he woke up while he remembered the thing that he was dreaming. Is that what the?
Yeah, he would actually try to go into this state of thinking about the problem. And that sometimes he would dream about it, wake up and couldn't remember where his brain went. But if he found that he would actually be in that loosely translucent state, or I don't know what liminal state, and that then if he dropped the book or the bell or whatever, it would wake him back up, and then he'd be jolted. Now, I'm going to go fact check myself, and I'll report back tomorrow if that's actually true.
Yeah, whether or not that was actually Edison or not.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I love fact checking stories and quotes to make sure that they're actually accurate, because usually I think your story is right, and I think maybe mine's right, but usually if somebody says Thomas Edison said, or Hemingway said, or Maya Angelou said, they probably didn't say it.
Right, exactly. All right, we'll follow up tomorrow and see what you found out.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Bye now.